Hello, this presentation is about our new online claim form for high-cost special education. My name is Rosalind Bidorf, and I am a consultant on the School Financial Services team, mainly working with the special education aides. There are three categories of cost. The first being child-specific, second program cost, and lastly specified services cost. What is a child-specific cost? These are costs of salary and fringe benefits, purchase services, placement, transportation, supplies, depreciation, and extended school year that are particular to a child. Program costs are salary and fringe benefits, purchase services, transportation, supplies, and depreciation that are particular to a program. A program is a set of special education and related services for the child and other children identified with the same disability related needs. Some examples include cross categorical instruction, transition services, and early childhood special education. But the applicant could also identify other sets of services such as speech and language or specialized transportation or other types of IEP driven programs the LEA provides. Specified service costs include salary and fringe benefits, purchase services, and supplies for the provision of specified services, which are nursing, social work, psychology, guidance counseling, speech and language pathology, and audiology. This data is pulled from your PI 1505 SE. So, getting started, to access your high cost special education claim form, you need to sign into the Wisconsin School Finance Portal, WSFIP, using either your WAMS ID or Google password. Select the High Cost Special Education Report. This should bring you directly to the Home tab of the application. Make sure to select the 2020-2021 year from the dropdown. The application process begins with identifying your high-cost special education students. You should have some idea who these students are, as you can quickly identify costs like tuition, one-to-one aid, special transportation arrangements, or need special equipment. Select the Student tab at the top and select Add New Student option. You will need the student's WISE ID for your entries, as the application is linked to WISE data. Once you enter a student's WISE ID, the application will populate with the student's name. You will also need to identify the Medicaid revenue and or open enrollment statement revenue if your district used the actual cost open enrollment option. If your district chose the basic open enrollment option, you do not have to report that amount. There's more detail under the Student tab, but first we will continue reviewing the other tabs and we will return to the Student tab later. Next, navigate to the Program tab to identify the programs your high-cost students participate in by selecting Add New Program option. When you select Add New Program option, it asks you to identify if you're adding instruction support services program or transportation. In this example, I am adding instruction support services. Make sure your program title is something meaningful, as you will need to reference it later when you link the student to it. In this example, I used the word West Side, but you could also have used SL1 or by teacher's last name, anything that would have meaning to you. The program description field is optional. In addition, on the screen is where you identify the unit of service for the program, caseload, days, minutes, or periods. I'm going to pause a minute here, as there is always questions about unit of service. There are 4 units of service to choose from. Minutes, which is most appropriate for programs where IEPs usually specify the amount of service in minutes, such as speech and language and OT or PT. Periods, which is most appropriate for programs delivered in a self-contained classroom, such as transition or cross-categorical class. Days is most appropriate when the program is varied from one IEP to another, like specialized transportation service. And caseload, which simply allocates cost evenly by student. With caseload, beyond identifying the cost, the only other program questions are the number of students served and the total days of instruction. Based on the unit of service you choose, you get different follow-up questions. In this example, I am choosing minutes, which prompts the following questions. I am also adding transportation. When you select transportation, the unit of service will default to days. You can see on our Program tab, we have two programs entered. Note the arrow expands the program to identify cost. By selecting the Add Program Specific Cost, I can enter specific costs for the program, such as salary benefits or supplies. I can also select the Add Program Specific Equipment here or add it when I get to the Equipment tab. By selecting the Add Program Specific Cost option, I can add costs for the program. Here I am entering salary benefits for one of the instructors in the program. You will need the instructor's license, EFN, and name as the application is not yet linked to YStaff. A future upgrade to this online application will be a connection with YStaff, verifying staff license and assignment in real time. The cost description is an optional field, but if there is detail you can add here that is meaningful to you, you may want to consider doing it. Earlier, when I identified this program, I identified two instructors with the program. So now I am identifying the second instructor. You can see what costs are entered for the speech language program. You can also see why completing the cost description field may be helpful. Now you are going to complete the cost for the transportation program we added. Again, by expanding the arrow and selecting the Add Program Specific Cost option, I am adding a cost for our bus route for 20 students. When you do enter transportation, the cost type ID defaults to transportation and the woofer code defaults to 256000. The next tab is the Equipment tab. The equipment must have been purchased by the applicant within the last 5 years of the fiscal year being claimed and used exclusively for special education services during that time. A depreciated amount equal to 20% of the purchase cost is eligible to be claimed. Equipment can be child specific or program, as you will always be asked to identify which when entering the detail. The applicant must provide a serial number or VIN and purchase date. The system now has checks in place to verify equipment entries. You can see here I tried entering a total cost of $4,000 and it alerts me that my entry does not meet the $5,000 threshold. In addition, I tried entering a date older than 5 years and the system alerts me that is not a valid date. The check isn't within 5 years of the fiscal year being claimed. For example, this year's fiscal year 22, the application is collecting costs for fiscal year 21, which means an equipment purchase can go as far back as July 1, 2016. As an example, I am entering a child-specific equipment cost for a changing table with a unit cost of $8,000 and a purchase date of 2017. But what if the item is less than 5,000? Does that mean it is not eligible for high-cost special education aid? No, it means that it can be entered as a supply for either the program or child specific and must be current purchase within the fiscal year being collected. So this year, fiscal year 22, we are collecting data from fiscal year 21. If the supply purchase was in fiscal year 21 to meet a student's IEP, it can be claimed. The Specified Services tab is calculating daily rates for non-administrative pupil service functions based on expenditure data reported in your agency's PI 1505 SE and enrollment data from the WISE data submission. An applicant does not have to do anything on this tab. Before we move on to the Finalize tab, we need to return to the Student tab and link students to programs. Again, by clicking the arrow next to the student, it expands the information. When the individual student is expanded, it looks like this. Right now it shows all zeros because while we have entered programs and equipment, we have not yet linked anything to the individual students. By selecting the Link Student to the Program option, you are able to link the individual student to programs you have entered. Here is why you want your program title to be meaningful, as that is what appears in the dropdown when linking the student to the program. In this example, if you had entered speech language for every speech and language program, it makes connecting the right student to the right speech and language program later challenging. Also note you could have added a new program from this screen too. When I identify that I am linking the student to the Speech Language West Side program, it automatically defaults to minutes as the program was entered, and the follow-up questions are pretty straightforward, asking the number of days the student was served by the program and number of minutes per day student attends. So how did I come to 108 days for this student? For example, I decided to have the student attend the speech and language class 3 times a week. I earlier identified the speech and language program operated for the year 180 days, which translates to 36 weeks. Therefore, if the student attended 3 times a week for the year, 3 times 36 weeks is 108 days. This would mean that if the student only attended one semester of the program 3 times a week, the number of days the student is served is 54. Next, I'm going to link the student to the West Side Bus program we entered. Again, it defaults to unit of service identified with this program, which was days, and the follow-up question is straightforward, simply asking number of days the student was served by the program or rides the bus. While the bus route we entered ran all year, the student you are identifying may or may not have rode every day. As you may recall, we entered 20 students on the bus. You could be linking multiple students on this claim to the same bus route. Some may have rode all year, others may have rode half a year, or some may ride only 2 or 3 days per week. Now let's add something child specific. By selecting the Add Child Specific Cost option, it brings up the fields to enter a child specific cost. In this example, I have entered a one-to-one program aid. Child specific means exactly that. It is without a doubt only a child specific cost for this student. By entering this program aid as child specific, I am saying the aid, S Hope, only serves this student and that this student is not served by a group of aides, but only S Hope. If the student was served by 2 program aides, maybe one in the morning and one in the afternoon, then it should be entered as a program, perhaps titled Aid Program, with 2 aides identified and 2 salary benefits entered for the program. This will be strictly enforced this year. We do not want LEAs entering everything as child specific and deciding how much they think student 1 uses speech and language versus student 2. It should be entered as a program, linking both student 1 and student 2 to it and determining the days, periods, minutes each student uses of the program based on their IEPs. Next, we will link equipment to the student by selecting the Add Child Specific Equipment. Recall earlier, we added a changing table under the Equipment tab, so that is the only piece of equipment that shows as the option from the drop-down. If we had added other equipment on the Equipment tab, those options would also appear in this drop-down. You can also see I can add equipment from this screen as well. You can see here when I select the changing table, it gives me the automatic 20% depreciation amount. The changing table total was $8,000 and 20% is $1,600. Now here is the expanded data for this student. We have our child-specific costs of the one-to-one aid, the speech and language program, and the specialized bus route, and the changing table. At the top, we have a student cost summary for each cost bucket, as well as an overall total for this student. When you have completed entering all of your data, you move to the Finalize tab. Your Finalize screen will include your student's name and other personal information that I have intentionally removed from the screenshot here. Here you can see the specified services getting pulled into the cost. The student we have entered together is giving an aid eligibility of $34,134.46. This does not mean this is what will be received for this student. It means if DPI is able to pay at the maximum 90% rate, the LEA could receive that. However, with special education costs increasing, DPI has not been able to pay at the 90% rate for a few years. And I'm going to take a few slides here to explain the calculation as it seems to be an area of confusion. Applicants are eligible for additional aid if the applicant incurred in the previous school year more than $30,000 of non-administrative costs for providing special education and related services to a child, and those costs were not eligible for reimbursement from other sources of revenue received. So, what are these student deductible revenues? Costs reimbursed under the state special education and school age parents aid program, the Federal Individual with Disabilities Education Act or other grant programs, federal Medicaid, or revenue from an open enrollment transfer based on exact costs of special education and related services. So, as previously stated, for a student to be eligible, the applicant must have spent more than $30,000 of non-administrative costs for providing special education and related services to a child. But your revenues count towards meeting that 30,000. If your revenues are less than 30,000, the difference is made up by pulling it out of your eligible cost. If the revenues are more than 30,000, the total amount of revenues must be deducted out, and the aid eligibility is based on 90% of the eligible cost. So going back to our student that we entered together, you see the deductible revenues total $21,999.36. Since this student's revenue did not total 30,000, we need to meet that 30,000 by pulling the difference out of the eligible cost, which is $8,000.64. The amount left is $37,927.18, but state statute states only 90% of that is eligible for aid, and you see that we get to the eligible amount of $34,134.46 if DPI is able to pay at that maximum aid rate. There is never a guarantee with some certain appropriations. Like the special education categorical aid, we cannot pay more than what is allocated for the high cost special education program. Returning back to your finalizing your high cost special education claim, if you are satisfied with your data, you can proceed to submit your claim. The next part of the Finalize tab is comparing your claim to your PI 1505 SE data. Your claim can match or be lower than your SE by function. For example, you cannot claim private tuition on your high cost special education claim form when you have nothing coded to function 436000 in your PI 1505 SE, or claim a one-to-one program aid for $50,000 when you have only 25,000 coded to function 159000 in your PI 1505 SE. These would be clear disconnects to what you are reporting. No high-cost special education claim can be submitted with these errors. Highlighted orange disconnects like you see here will prevent you from submitting your claim. I hope you found walking through the high-cost special education claim form helpful. Please contact me if you have any questions or concerns as you work through the form.